All right, welcome to episode 31 of the Retro Game Club podcast, and this will be our last episode of 2019. And joining me is Rob.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of you just had heart attacks. Yeah, we decided it's been a great, I guess you'd call it season one, and everything gets busy during the holidays, so we figured we'd use that time to actually not take a break, but catch up on topics that we want to actually explore in this podcast for season 2, which will start early in January.
Yes, probably very early.
Yeah.
Because there's no time of year with less going on than January.
That's probably true, yeah. So what have you been up to?
Well, I've been playing some of the games on the Switch, the free, well, not free, but the Super Nintendo and NES games you get if you subscribe. At least one of them I'm gonna save for towards the end of the show, because it'll be probably my pick for the next game of the episode. And I did play through the easy mode Zelda 2, which is a lot easier, but the last dungeon is still brutal. I just don't think, even though you can bank like 9 extra lives, the last dungeon is just really, really unfair. Because, like, the second to last boss, you have to use the thunder magic to damage them. Right? And that basically consumes your entire magic meter. You have enough to maybe cast shield or something afterwards. But there's really not a lot of magic recharges. So by the time you get to this boss, your magic meter is too low to cast thunder. So you have to die before you fight that second to last boss. So it's just, the whole game is just unfair at the end. And I forgot just how terribly unfair it was. And then the actual last boss really isn't very hard. So I guess that's good. But yeah, that's, I think that's all I've been playing. Let me think here. Yeah, that's about it. What have you been up to?
Just really playing our games and, a lot of family stuff going on. Like you said, January is the slowest month. Up until then is the most stressful month. But, yeah, it didn't make it in our show notes here, but yeah, they just released some new games for the Switch, didn't they? Kirby, Star Fox 2, Crystalis.
Yeah, Crystalis, which I don't think I've ever played through.
And
Breath of Fire 2. And I don't know, Breath of Fire 1 was already on there, and I don't know if those games are tightly connected. Like, you have to do one to understand the other. It's always, with RPG sequels, it's always, 50-50 shot that you have to have played the previous game to understand the sequel?
Yeah. But, other than that, I've been trying to get before recently, I always picked really big coding projects that never got onto GitHub, and I didn't want anyone looking at my code because I never cleaned it up, yada, yada, yada. Anyway, so I have a bunch of little small projects I've been loading up GitHub with, which I've actually linked this time. For some reason, before I didn't want to say my GitHub name, but it's Undead Industries, because I used to use that for publishing stuff, and now it's just there. But I'll link this in the show notes. I just wrote a Q2CHD program. Windows for right now, Linux probably by the end of the day. And all that does is, if you have a bunch of like SEGA CD or anything, any old optical-based media retro system, you may have BenQ files. And now most cores support CHD, which combines them all into one file and compresses them, so you can save space too. And this will do folders or just one file. It'll uncompress files that are like in RAR or zip or something, and compress them all for you into CHD. It's handy for stuff like emulating on the Vita, stuff like that.
Oh yeah, because the Vita, the storage is so limited
and expensive.
Yeah, I think there's an SD.
There's
some sort of there's an SD thing, but I think even those are getting like rare now.
I think they break easy too, if I remember right.
Yeah, there was some. I was reading reviews of one, and there was some issue that prevented me from buying one. So it just means if I want to load a new Vita game that I don't have a cartridge for, I have to delete some other game. I was smart enough to buy like a ton of PSP memory cards when those all went on clearance a few years ago.
Oh, I missed that. And right when I got my Vita, yeah, the PSP kind of went up on the shelf, even though it's one of my favorite systems. So many great games for that.
Yeah, the PSP, I know it's not quite considered retro yet, so I don't talk about it too much, but it has a really solid RPG library. Mm-hmm. And that's mostly what I play on it. And I really wish there was some, way to play PSP games on TV. I know there is. I have an adapter to hook up a PSP to the TV, but you're still playing it on the PSP and you have like a long cable. I mean, like, I fire up the PlayStation 4 and I download a PSP game and I play it.
Yeah, something as easy as that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you can emulate it, but then you can't use your real carts. So.
Yeah, and the emulation's kind of interesting because there are a few RPGs that didn't get official English translations that now there are fan translations of. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of appealing, but I still have a backlog of actual games, of like games I bought in a store to finish.
Yeah. Well, before we get into news, one more housekeeping thing we both keep always forgetting to mention. Please give us some stars on iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcasts. It really helps us. Even if you're lying, just give us 5 stars. It's not hurting anyone, right? But, yeah, should we dive into the last news of Season 1, 2019?
Yeah, let's do that. So, I still don't know what this article's about. We were talking about this last episode, and then I didn't read it, and I still haven't read it.
And we just deleted it because we were so unprepared because, we forgot to read this one.
But you're prepared this time.
So yes. Creative Assembly and Sega's Tim Heaton, it has an opportunity to create and share knowledge. So, I just butchered that title, but what this article is on MCV/develop, Sega now has a developer conference. The first one just happened this year. I'm trying to see where it was at, but I feel like it was in Europe somewhere. But like John Romero is there, Kate Gregory, some people I have never heard of. And it's really a developer-focused conference. Eventually, they're going to allow fans in. Like, it's pretty much invite right now. Pretty soon, I think they'll open it up to the public. They already said they're definitely going to do it in 2020 and try to slowly grow it. They don't want it to become an annoying an annoying convention. So, yeah, I thought this was a cool thing to note that Sega's still doing a lot of stuff,
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I was trying to read some more information about what kind of topics there were at the Sega Dev Day convention. I assume it's mostly, or probably almost exclusively, modern stuff.
Romero is there.
Okay.
That's vintage in itself, right?
Sure.
Or I guess retro, not vintage.
All right, what else have we got here? Intellivania, Castlevania on the Intellivision. So this is an unlicensed Castlevania port on Intellivision, and it looks great.
It looks so good. I cannot believe this is Intellivision.
Yeah, it doesn't look as good as the NES version, of course, but it looks really great regardless.
I think it looks pretty close.
Yeah, I mean, the color, it obviously it lacks a little bit of detail, and the color palette's a little odd, but I could never pull something like this off.
No, this is like incredible programming. Just this was a feat.
Yeah.
And
there is a link to a playable demo if you want to download it and play it on your favorite emulator. Don't know if we'll get a takedown letter or not. Who knows?
True, yeah, I don't know how Konami is about that, but I highly suggest anyone who likes either Castlevania or Intellivision to check this out. This is on indieretronews.com. Yeah, I can't believe this exists. Do you know anything about the Intellivision? Is it that much more powerful than like a 2600?
Oh yeah, it's a lot more It's essentially a 16-bit system.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
the
is it
CPU at least.
Yeah.
Right. It's 16-bit CPU. So I don't know like the specifics of it. I have looked into like coding on the Intellivision and the tools. I didn't really find anything that. Basically, I didn't find like something that work on Linux. So I didn't really play with it too much yet.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I always just thought it was like 2600. I guess power wise.
No, it's not a chip I'm familiar with, but it's called the CP1600. It is a Honeywell chip similar to the PDP-11. So if it's similar to PDP-11, then like the assembler language for it is probably close to Motorola 68000, because those aren't too far off. At least the instruction set is probably similar. So yeah, I never really thought about it. I don't have like an assembler for it. Wouldn't really even. I thought a little bit about doing an Intellivision demo at some point, but I really couldn't find a good way to get started on it. Now there are tools like Intellivision Basic that make it a whole lot easier.
But you're not going to write anything groundbreaking with that.
No, people have done some pretty impressive games in it.
Huh.
People have done some really, really impressive games with it. Now, looking at this Castlevania thing, though, it's a little more, and I didn't catch this the first time I looked at it, but you need to have, there's a little bit of a trick here. It is Intellivision, but according to the article, it also requires the ECS ROM. So the ECS is an add-on for the Intellivision that turns the Intellivision into a computer. There's like, I don't know, 4 or 5 games that were made for it ever.
Oh, okay.
So this is running on a little bit more. I mean, it's still incredibly impressive, but it's running on a little bit more than just default Intellivision hardware.
Okay, this makes way more sense now. Huh.
Yeah, I own like one ECS game, which I got by accident.
How do you get it? How do you
No,
get
by
it?
accident. Well, this is like one of my biggest, like, I went to a yard sale, and unfortunately it was not near my house. It was up in Wisconsin. And they had a box, and I saw an Intellivision sticking out of the box and a whole bunch of games. And I said, oh, what do you want for the Intellivision in the box of games? And they said $5. So I bought that, put it in my trunk, and did not look in the box. And then, maybe looked around the sale a little bit more, blah, 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 left. When I finally got home, I unpacked the box of games and saw that inside there was the Jetsons game for Intellivision, which is an ECS game. And I thought, oh, I bet those people also had an Intellivision ECS somewhere in their pile of junk, and I missed it.
Huh.
Maybe it broke, but like this game had cleared, like the box had been open, they played it.
Yeah.
So it's not like they accidentally bought a game and it was still in shrink wrap or never used. So I'm like, oh, see, if I'd gone through that box before I left, I might have, been able to also get an ECS that day.
Yeah. Well, you got a hell of a price on it then.
yeah. I mean, it was a good deal. So that's enough about my Intellivision adventures here.
OpenGL multi-threading boosts gaming performance on emulators.
Yeah, that's a long title.
Yes, this is on neowin.net, and you could file this under Captain Obvious, I guess. Like, I just assumed this was happening. So, if somehow you don't know, listeners, OpenGL is a 3D rendering library, kind of API, invented by Silicon Graphics, and it's used extensively in emulating retro games. And when you start emulating GameCube and stuff like that, it really starts pegging your system. So if you multi-thread, then which really kind of means multitask, not really, but using more than one thread or processor at once, then you could get up to 10 to 20% more frame rate from your games. So cool.
Yeah,
I thought this was going to be a more detailed article, but it really
kind of reads more like a press release.
Exactly, yeah. It's like, cool. Thanks for the info. But I thought I'd link it here just in case anyone was interested. And there's a few other links to get more details in it from within this article.
All right. So next one here, this is a page that I need to subscribe to. This is not on my RSS feed list. So Paleotronic. This is a Australia-based retro gaming magazine. And they have a big article called The Home Computer Christmas Wars, which is about exactly what the title describes. And it reviews a lot of different computers from the 80s with some great photos, and talks a little bit about like why certain systems were more successful than others. Talks a little bit about how the atom tanked. It's a really good it's a good piece.
Yeah. I love all the photos in here. These like the family opening up their Christmas. What is that? A VIC 20? Yeah, yeah. Just these late 70s photos are just priceless, and and it kind of ends with how really the console wars almost immediately ended the computer wars.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to make a point, but I sort of got lost on it here. Part of it is like, this is like the Australian perspective, maybe, which is going to look a little different than what we saw in America. Like, I think each country, that's why I find these articles fascinating, because I'm always curious to see how different computers did in different regions. And yeah, I don't know if consoles killed off. I would never say consoles killed off computer gaming. Like, I don't think computer gaming was as mainstream in the US as it was in other territories. We had, obviously, like, the C64 and Apple were successful, but I don't think they were ever in America as ubiquitous as the Atari 2600, and certainly not the NES. And then computer gaming today is still, it's obviously a huge market, but it's, I assume, nowhere near, like, far more people have a Switch than have a gaming PC.
Yeah, computer gaming here really didn't matter much until Doom came out. Then people started getting into DOS gaming a bit more, I think.
Right, because you couldn't really get a good home port of Doom for a long time. You still barely can get a good home port of Doom.
Yeah.
It's purely blunt. Like, I don't know how it is that you still can't just get a good copy of Doom
without having to create an account, like the Switch Doom.
Yeah. Actually, I have the Switch Doom, but I never had to create an account, but the controls on it are all kind of funky. So
yeah. Oh, speaking of magazines, remember how the last episode we reported from Magpie magazine?
Oh, yeah.
Well, they had a deal, so I figured I'd get a subscription. It was like a stupid low price, and I thought, why not? I'll support this magazine. It's really cool. Literally everything in it interests me. So I did the purchase, and I forget exactly what order this happened in, but I did the purchase, meaning my card was charged, and then I was in a hurry, so the next day I went to download the app, but the app didn't have my email address that I purchased it with. So somehow, it's like I paid for this thing, but somehow I still don't have access to it, and I just haven't had a chance to. You think nothing's ever easy is my point.
Yes, everything with technology is terrible. So, move on to Nintendo Life. The Super Nintendo PlayStation was going to have a Super FX chip built in. So this is just based on a developer interview from back in the day where it was revealed that, that was part of the plans, but it didn't happen. They didn't speculate if the Super Nintendo PlayStation would make the system more comparable to the 3DO or Jaguar. And I would have to give it a good solid no. It's much closer to 32X plus Sega CD then.
Yeah. Well, and to be clear, this was saying that by the time this was going to happen, it was too late for the Japanese Super Famicom and they are contemplating it for the US SNES.
Yeah. Which, since most development was still done out of Japan, it meant no one would have taken advantage of it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if anything, some carts would have been a little bit cheaper to produce here, but still pretty interesting. If they thought about this a few months earlier, maybe it would have happened.
Yeah.
This next one was mine from Ars Technica. Half an operating system, the triumph and tragedy of OS2. So those who don't know, OS2 was IBM's DOS and then Windows competitor that was half developed by Microsoft anyway. And in a few ways, it was more superior than DOS, but they cut ties. Windows NT, Project NT, actually was supposed to be the next version of OS2, but they cut ties and Windows NT became Windows NT. And OS2 still stayed OS2.
So OS2, survived a much longer time than people think. There is actually still like an annual OS2 conference. I read something not very long ago, and I just looked to confirm that I was not dreaming this up, that the New York City subway system runs on OS2.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's like the nuclear systems, right? Running on who knows what. So yeah, it once you got locked in, that's the problem. Once you get like locked into something like this, it can be very, very hard to migrate. I remember OS2 from working in a game store back in the stupid days, where we sold it. It was just like a retail product. It was just on the shelf next to what was then Windows 3.1, and pretty much nobody bought. Like the only people that bought OS2 were people that had some sort of grudge against Microsoft, but didn't want to go the Apple route, I guess.
And it was OS2 3 Warp was an amazing operating system. It was fast. It was multitasking. It had protected memory, if I remember right, but it didn't have the games and stuff.
Yeah, it was a productivity system, right? It wasn't meant. So already you're kind of cutting the market a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. It's one of those things that you want to work, but at the time that OS2 and Microsoft were battling this out, Amiga OS already had multitasking and 3D rendering, and so I don't know why Amiga didn't win.
Yeah, and it's owned by somebody, some smaller company bought the rights to it and continues to support it. Again, just for like people I think who are pretty much stuck on it. Like you have some sort of specialty system that's incredibly hard to replace. So you continue to run whatever OS2 is called today.
Yeah. But we don't judge them. We continue to run our old game systems. So
No, I don't. No, I mean, look, if whatever you're doing OS2 works for, go ahead and use it. I don't care.
Yeah.
You probably can't do Twitter on OS2, so it's already a win.
It has Gopher built in. You could still do Gopher.
Yeah. How Oddworld solved its narrative problems with mind control. I haven't played through Oddworld, so you're gonna have to help me with this one here.
Oh, Oddworld's a great game. It's one of those games that I didn't like when it came out, but now I really like it. I think I do actually. I think I do, but in small doses. So this is a video. It's about a 25-minute video of the creator of Oddworld, and he's just sitting down, and he talks about the history, how he came up with the story and the designs and the whole plan for. It was supposed to be a 5-part series, and they were the only studio in '97 for Sony that was going to release on time for the holiday season. And that was such a huge win for them. But then Sony said, all right, you got to do it again for '98's holiday season. So they had to write and code Oddworld Exodus, which is just, it's not Oddworld 2. It's not part of that 5-part series he wanted it to be. And he goes into the story like that, and kind of the demise of that studio, and then how when Steam came along and PlayStation 4, I guess PS Store came out, they could just now sell all those old games for free. It's no overhead for them to make money to create this new game that just came out. So it's a really, really, really interesting interview. He's looking back at the history with 2020 vision and yada, yada, yada. Mm-hmm. It's on Ars Technica, and to enjoy this video, I don't think you need to know Oddworld. It's a pretty good interview.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. The Verge has an article called The Rise and Fall of the PlayStation Supercomputer. So this is not especially old, but I think this is kind of interesting. This is about the brief period of time where people were using PlayStation 3s as computing arrays. So where universities would get racks, and they have pictures of them, racks and racks of PlayStation 3s all wired together to solve problems that you need distributed computing for.
Yeah, like protein folding and stuff like that, I think. And
yeah, they talk about like finding black holes and stuff like that.
Did you have a PS3?
No, I skipped the PS3 entirely. So that was the generation when my kids were really young.
Okay.
So like I couldn't just have like Grand Theft Auto running on the TV.
Yeah, God of War,
yeah. So I had, in that generation, I had a Wii and a PSP. So games that were maybe not kid friendly, I could like Manhunt or something, or Manhunt 2, whichever one was on PSP. Mm-hmm. I could play that on PSP. But anything else, had to be on, was on the more family friendly Wii system.
Well, they actually sold the PS3, by sold I mean marketed, as a computer you can install other operating systems on. Mm-hmm. And then shortly after that, took away that ability. So I got like, in a class action lawsuit, I think I got like $13 or something.
Yeah, like it mentions here, like when they pulled the open operating system thing from the PS3, the Air Force had to convince Sony to sell them the unsold stock of unpatched PlayStations.
That's terrifying.
Project they're working on. Yeah. So speaking of Sony settlements, because I got the Vita at launch, or around launch time, there was some. The original Vita ad campaigns had you starting a game on PlayStation 3 and then continuing it on Vita.
Yep.
And then you couldn't do that. So there was a class action suit, and lawyers got $8 bajillion, and the rest of us got a free game download. So there you go.
Yeah, but this is a great article, and a lot of people don't know about this. The PS2 was actually banned in a few countries because it was powerful enough to guide missiles.
Well, it wasn't
something like that.
It's the cryptography, right? So in the U.S., I know this from working for a big software company. Mm-hmm. There are like 3 or 4 countries you're not allowed to export anything with a certain level of cryptography included, because I guess we think North Korea can't figure out how to Google encryption algorithms.
Yeah.
So, like, if you're using certain types of encryption, you can't export your software to, it's like North Korea, Syria, Iran, possibly still Cuba, and then Crimea, which is kind of confusing. So you'd export the software to Ukraine or Russia, but not someone in Crimea. Well, whatever. No, it's just nonsense I have to know.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's all about the can it export certain types of encryption. Mind you, these are things you can go to like OpenPGP and just download. Like,
yeah. There's
no, like, that's what's insane about it to me. There's nothing stopping you from getting the algorithms that...
It's literally just politics.
But that was part of it, is like the PlayStation 3 also was like more powerful than the most powerful computer that we thought North Korea had. So, yeah, it was banned for export for that reason. I mean, North Korea has a several thousand-mile long border with China where most of the stuff is made. So it doesn't seem like it'd be real hard for them to get their hands on a PlayStation 3.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. For those of you who aren't Hugh or Rob, you did not hear us just accidentally read an article that's a year old. But it happens to be on the same website. This is a Ben Heck article. Project started in 2000, finally finished. An Atari 2600 Junior single chip portable.
Nice. Yeah, so this is I know you can buy a at Games Atari 2600 portable that you can play like every game ever made on. You can put in an SD card and all that stuff. You can be a really small SD card and fit every Atari game ever made. Mm-hmm. But the emulation on it is not really perfect. There's a game I'm going to talk about later in this episode that does not play on that at Game system, for example. But this is based on actual Atari Junior hardware. So it will play anything that you can play on an Atari 2600.
Mm-hmm.
And the design on this looks amazing. Atari should, or whatever, the company that calls themselves Atari should definitely license this.
Yeah, just do this thing. Yeah. So people who aren't here right now, again, who are listening to us, it looks like a Game Boy with a D-pad, 2 buttons, and what's this? And a start and or select and reset. What's the knob underneath the D-pad?
I assume that is for the paddle controller.
Oh,
another thing you cannot do on the at Game system. I'm looking at there's a YouTube video where they show this being assembled, and that is definitely the so you can play Kaboom.
Wow, cool.
And the whole system is not much bigger than an Atari 2600 cartridge itself. You snap the cartridge into the back of the system, and it just looks awesome. If they could mass produce this, I would definitely buy one.
Yeah, absolutely. Me too. And that takes care of news for 2019.
Yes. So we're going to go back real quick and talk about the decade of the 2010s. This entire decade is now coming to an end. And first person that sends us but technically there was no year zero, so blah, blah, blah. Like, we will ban you from all social media that we don't have. So we're going to talk about some of our favorite, each of us are going to pick 3 of our favorite retro games of the past decade. We're using very broad terms. So this could be a game for a retro system. It could be a game done in a retro style, or it could be like, retro inspired or a remake of a retro game.
Yeah. So let's keep going one off. I'll do one, you do one.
Yeah, let's go.
So my first one was Sonic Mania. Came out in 2017. It could be the best Sonic game. And another great thing about this is it started as a ROM hack. And SEGA contacted the person, said, want to make a real Sonic game. And that's how all this happened. That's how different SEGA and Nintendo are.
Now, was it a ROM hack, or was it... I thought the developer was basically making like a system to play Sonic games on mobile devices and had sort of reverse engineered the Sonic engine.
No, I don't know.
Maybe the distinction between ROM hack and hacking the ROM to play on something new is a minor point.
But yeah, he did a great job at even making the waterfalls in this look retro, because they had to use a trick to do that, using interlacing, or the interlacing that happens in TVs anyway. Since that doesn't happen anymore, he needed to make it look like that. And did a great job with small stuff like that. Not much more to say about this game,
Yeah. I mean, the Sonic franchise, if you will, had I think most people would agree the 2000s, the zeros, were not good to Sonic.
No.
And this, I really think, made Sonic like a credible series again.
Yeah.
All right. I'm gonna go with another. I'll pick a smaller game too, or game by a smaller developer. Retro City Rampage. So this originally started as Grand Theft Tendo. It was an NES ROM.
I did not know that.
Yeah, that was originally what it was called. It was going to be an NES ROM, and the developer then, I guess, looked at the bigger picture and said, you know what, I could, instead of limiting myself to an NES game, I could create a game to run on multiple systems, which he ultimately did. Like, originally this was going to be a WiiWare game, but then it didn't launch on the Wii. It launched on like everything except the Wii. Eventually became a WiiWare game, but it was on, Vita, and you can download it on DS. I have it on both Vita and DS.
Yeah, that's the only place I've played it.
Yeah.
Is the DS.
And it's still, like, from a color palette standpoint, still limits itself to NES palettes. So it still looks like it's an NES game. But, it's obviously much larger than an NES game. And yeah, it's sort of a open world, Grand Theft Auto style game. You get missions, you get lots of different vehicles. You can just run around and cause chaos in the town. And then he hired some chiptune composers to, some guys from like Overclocked Remix that also knew how to do chiptune stuff, to do chiptune style music for the game. So it sounds like you're playing an NES game too.
Yeah. Yeah, and are there sequels to this game, or are they just kind of remakes?
He did well, there's a lot of remakes, and then there's a new one that is 16-bit themed. Caught me off guard here. Hold on. What was it called? So, and I feel really bad not having played this yet, because I know I would really, really like this game. And that it's called Shakedown Hawaii.
That's right, yeah.
And this is on Switch, DS, PS4, and Vita. And this is, graphically very similar to Retro City Rampage, but it's meant to have more of a 16-bit aesthetic. It looks like engine-wise it's kind of the same game, which is good, because, the game was fun.
Yeah.
And taking place in Hawaii, it's almost like it's a Vice City ripoff. I know that takes place in fictional Miami, but same idea, like you're in this sort of tropical paradise, but all sorts of badness is going on. I should go see how much this is right now on Amazon or something. We're not sponsored by Amazon or anybody else. I just reflexively look there first. Is it just you? Like, I don't know about your neighborhood, but we have like constant like Amazon Prime trucks circling our neighborhood now.
It's crazy.
Yeah, they've like built their own UPS or something.
Yeah, well, we have a warehouse, 3 or 4 miles from our house. So we also have the big semis too. Okay.
Yeah, we don't have the nearest warehouse is actually just like directly across the border, because I'm assuming Wisconsin, cuts like really horrible deals with companies all the time.
Yeah.
So they got some kind of like Foxconn deal to build a giant Amazon distribution center like right across the border from Illinois. I'm sure I'm sure Wisconsin gave them like $2 billion or something in tax rates.
Yeah.
All right, so Shakedown Hawaii, not my game because I haven't played it yet, but Retro City Rampage, great game.
Yeah. My next one is PacMan 256. Mm-hmm. It came out in when did this come out? 2015, 2016. Mm-hmm. And I first learned of it on PlayStation 4. I didn't even know it was a mobile game, but that makes sense. And it's an endless runner Pac-Man where you kind of get new abilities. The further you go, the more abilities you could get. I wouldn't call it a party game, but sometimes when we have a few people over, we'll just pass around the PlayStation 4 controller, with this thing kind of on in the background. And it's a really cool idea where, the last stage of the original Pac-Man, if you get to it, it gets all glitched out, Well, this is the next stage where the glitch is following you from the bottom up. So you have to make sure it keeps pushing you in that direction, and you can't let the glitches touch you or you die. And There's still ghosts chasing you. Just a wonderful reimagining of the original Pac-Man. I really can't say anything bad about this game. You could get it for dirt cheap. I don't know if it's better or worse on mobile. I've only played it on PS4.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's. I don't like mobile controls, so I also like that this has like a Super Pac-Man shout out, if you will, because you can get like you can get power ups where you're now giant Pac-Man, like back in Super Pac-Man.
Or you could get laser beams and make everyone slower, and it's just a really cool game. I can't say anything bad about this game. It may have been my game of the year for 2015, 2016.
Yeah.
What's your next one?
So I'm going to go with, this actually just barely qualifies because it came out in 2010. I double checked though that it is from this period. And that is Halo 2600. Fan game by Ed Fries. So, real developer. But it kind of goes to show like what kind of amazing things you can do when you don't have like the time crunch, when you have like modern tooling and you don't have to try and get a game out before Christmas, right? Like this is just a thing being done for fun. And so this is this is Pac-Man reimagined as, not Pac-Man, sorry, Halo reimagined as an Atari 2600 game. Have you played this?
I watched the videos of it when you picked it because I didn't have time to play it.
Yeah, so this game is it must take advantage of some like hardware tricks that At Games isn't aware of, because this does not run on the At Games Atari 2600 player. It runs in Stella, so that's about the best way to play it. And it's just like an overhead. So you can imagine it's sort of, it's not really overhead because you're seeing the characters from the side, so it's like a perspective game. But you start off on like a forest level, and you have to find the gun and the shield, and then you shoot, you're basically shooting enemies. There's like 6 or 8 rooms per level that you have to get through. And like as you get further on, the enemies and the layouts get way, way more difficult. So like you have enemies that can, that basically shoot faster than you and can shoot at angles you can't shoot at, making them really difficult. You have like hazards, things you touch and you die. So if you haven't played, like visually, it's sort of visually a lot like E.T. It's kind of that perspective.
It's kind of like Berserk too.
A little bit like Berserk. Yeah, it's like a Berserk and E.T. crossover, but way better than either of those games.
Yeah, I agree.
And there's a last boss even. Like you can watch speed runs of the game. I can't get through. I can only get to about the 3rd set of levels, and then I get killed. I mean, it gets really difficult. But yeah, it's just a tremendously good 2600 game. If it came out in 1982, it would have been just a mega smash, I think, because it's so far more advanced. Like there's not a lot of 2600 games that are quite as advanced in good looking as this game. Like the number, like just the amount of space it uses, like the number of screens, the detail of the enemies, the controls are great. Like it's just one of the most well-made 2600 games ever.
Yeah. He even looks like he looks like Master Chief. Master Chef.
Yeah. Now, clearly, like, you couldn't have made this game because it's all based on this IP. Like, part of the appeal is like, it's based on this world that people know. But something like this would have been a huge deal back in the day.
You really, seriously, you could play it and not have it explained to you at all. Like, I don't know anything about Halo, and I knew what was going on, But yeah, I'll play that one day, definitely. My next one is Kingsway. This is a 2017. It's produced by Adult Swims, but it doesn't feel like one of their kind of corny games. This is a game that looks like a Windows 95 screen, or even Windows 3.1. It's a fantasy role-playing game with very limited graphics. It almost feels like an old... I'm trying to think of another example that it would look like. Kind of a more colorful wizardry, I guess. It kind of has the old BattleTech type graphics, but it explains everything like that's going on. So, if it's such a hard game to explain without showing it to someone, so if you you walk around by clicking the map, and then like in Final Fantasy or a Zelda 2, if you you run into someone, you can either try to avoid them or you could fight them. They might be way more powerful than you. If you fight them, you have to quickly, click some icons within a window that starts moving around. That's kind of how they create more difficulty. And I haven't. I'm not saying this game's hard. I'm saying I'm not very good at it.
Okay.
Which I didn't get very far in it, but I really like this game. It's one of those games where you could die over and over and still have a great time. You collect potions. You could create a warrior or an adventurer, or like I think it's a wizard or something like that. Your standard fantasy characters you could be. It's so cheap on Steam. I think Steam's the only place you could get it. I can't recommend this game enough, and I'm just gonna leave it at that. Even when you when it's going to a new screen or something, it has hard drive clicking noises and other things that many people you don't even notice after a while. It just feels like you're playing on an old computer. I love the game. I love the cheesiness of it. Yeah. This is my, I think, number one game, retro type game, I guess, of the past decade.
Okay. Yeah.
Have you checked this one out at all?
I have not. No. It sounds like something I'd enjoy, but I haven't played it. I probably disregarded it as being an Adult Swim game and never.
Exactly. It took me a while to play. So at the very least, you and listeners, just watch a video of this, and I think at least a few of you will go out and actually buy it and play it. And if you do, email us, email@retrogameclub.net. Mm-hmm. What was your last one?
My last pick, I'm going to go with Legend of Zelda: A Link Between Worlds. So this is like the least retro of all my games, but it's a virtual clone of A Link to the Past, like graphically in play control. It's like they took the entire world of Link to the Past and remixed it. It's almost like a huge ROM hack in some ways. But it's not like to me, it's not like the Link's Awakening. Like I sort of debated, like, would I put the Link's Awakening remake on here? And I'd say, no, because they like kept the map the same.
Yep.
But they really, really overhauled the graphics. Whereas Link Between Worlds, the graphics really didn't change much. It's like you're playing a Super Nintendo game, really.
Yep.
And it's a huge game, and they started applying, like, it was the start of Zelda returning to being an open world game.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I was kind of down on the Zelda series after Skyward Sword, because Skyward Sword is just such a painfully linear game. Have you played that?
It was during my short time of not gaming.
Okay. So that was like the beginning of the decade, and it was Nintendo's first big Zelda release, and it's not a bad game. There's nothing really wrong with it. It's just really linear. It doesn't really feel like a Zelda game.
Mm-hmm.
I'd said it's much closer to being an Ys game than being a Zelda game.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of, like, there's a clear progression that you have to go through in the game, and if you try to explore, you're just going to end up like getting stuck. Like you'll just hit a dead end or some enemy that you're not. It's not even like an enemy you can't fight. It's basically just hit dead ends. So I'm like, oh well, I guess that's what the Zelda series is now. And then before Breath of the Wild was A Link Between Worlds, where suddenly it's like, hey, we're going to put you back in this 16-bit world, but now there's no restrictions on what order you do stuff in. Mm-hmm. So just from the beginning of the game, you can go to any dungeon you feel like, and then it has this like inventory system where you don't have to like earn special items. You do have to earn them, but you you can get access to like every special item in the game early. You know, like the way Zelda games, especially like Skyward Sword works, is like you get to a dungeon, you get stuck in the dungeon, but then you find an item that lets you finish the rest of that dungeon.
Mm-hmm.
And that item might have no usefulness anywhere else in the game ever. Twilight Princess was kind of notorious for that. You get 1 or 2 items in Twilight Princess that like you solve that one dungeon and then you will never need that item again.
Yeah, those Wii Zelda games, I never played. They're the only ones.
Yeah. Now Twilight Princess I still liked a lot. Skyward Sword, like, you know, if they did like Skyward Sword HD Mixed Master Edition or something, there's a decent chance I probably wouldn't get it. Like, I buy every Zelda game, but I don't know if I would be down for a Skyward Sword remake.
So as A Link Between Worlds, this is one I did not play. It keeps getting pushed off my list because I keep playing A Link to the Past. I keep playing A Link to the Past all the way through because I could do it so quickly.
Okay.
And it's just such a charming game. And I haven't played this one. And you know, it's kind of like going to a restaurant that you know you love one dish and you don't want to chance ordering something that's lesser than. And so that's why I haven't played this one yet.
Okay.
What do you think? Is it as good as A Link to the Past? Is it better?
Yeah, I mean, it's in some ways I think it's a little bit better because it's not A Link to the Past, obviously you can explore a lot, but this is actually even like less linear because it's maybe not as open as Breath of the Wild, but it's pretty much completely open from the beginning of the game. And I thought that was just so cool. You really have no restrictions on what order you play through the game in.
Very cool. Yeah, I gotta check this out.
All right, yeah. So those are our top games, retro style games of the past decade.
Yeah. So, if any listener wants to share their top games of the past decade, really retro or otherwise, email at retrogameclub.net.
Yes, and also while we're on the topic of emailing us, if there's anyone out there who is interested in doing some unpaid social media artwork, email us at email@retrogameclub.net. I don't want to talk about the specifics yet, but we have an idea for, season 2. We're going to refresh things a little bit, maybe some new artwork. That's all. So if you're artistically inclined, especially stuff that maybe has a good retro feel to it, go ahead and email us. I can't pay cash, but we can come up with something. I don't know. I mean, I could pay cash. I'm not going to. But we'll just email us and we'll work something out. How about that?
Yeah. Well, that leads us into Game Club, right? So I did Yie Ar Kung-Fu. It was a game I had been saving for a long time, and I picked it because the link to Bandersnatch that we talked about at the end of last episode, Ocean, which was also kind of Imagine Software, did some ports of this one. And it was like, I just saw the name and felt like I needed to play it again. This was the first game that I went into the arcade and I thought, those are amazing graphics. That's my first memory of having that thought. So this is a, I'd like to call it a Street Fighter type game.
Yeah. It's like that was kind of my feedback.
Proto Street Fighter?
Yeah, exactly. It was, maybe not as polished as Street Fighter because it's way, way older. But yeah, it's essentially Street Fighter.
Yeah, you play a kung fu master named Oolong, and you start out just like in Street Fighter. You fight one fighter at a time, and you can see who you're going to fight next. It's not random. After a while, you can't see who you're going to fight next until you get to them. Now, it's always in the same order, so you know who's going to come. But each fighter has a different style, so there's someone with a fighting stick, there's someone with nunchucks and throwing stars, and someone who flies around like a genie type thing. And your character is based off, Bruce Lee, kind of. And you jumped like Street Fighter, where you just push up or, up and forward or up and back. and you could jump really high. This is not like a Mega Man type thing. This is like a not a lot of gravity going around type thing. And it was developed by Konami in 1985. Started in arcades, but it was ported to everything. And my ports of note are I'm linking a Let's Compare video. This is a YouTube channel that goes through every port of specific games. I was very surprised to see this game in there, and it's a very, very useful and kind of fun channel to follow. This time I played the arcade one and the C64 one and Game Boy Advanced, and I watched videos for the rest. I played this game a lot over the past week. The ports of note are the actual ports are horrible. They don't even look or play like the game. The best one of those is C64. It got it the closest where, and by port, I mean, it's obviously they couldn't do it on this hardware. It's a little bit of a reimagining. And then the ones that seem very arcade, like they almost copied and pasted it, was PS1 and DS and Game Boy Advanced. DS being the best because on the bottom screen you get the controls. And on the Game Boy Advance, if you do the Konami code, there's 2 hidden characters. I couldn't get that to happen because it's on a Konami collection, and I couldn't tell if you had to do the code in the beginning or when you actually choose which game you're going to play. I already played this game so much in the arcade ROM that I was kind of done playing it. But I think this is a really fun game. I think it has a lot of replayability. The arcade and the Game Boy Advanced and DS ports have great control, I think. The other ones do not, so I'd say don't bother. Excuse me, even the NES one. And that is about all I have to say about that one. Do you play this one at all?
Yeah, I played a little bit on MAME, and the problem is I don't have the same nostalgia for it. I never really played it back in the day. And I started off and I played for a few minutes. I'm like, yeah, I think I'm gonna play Street Fighter now. It's sort of it kind of makes me want to play other fighting games. So I think if I played it back in the day, I mean, it's a pretty impressive game for when it came out.
Oh yeah.
Really, I really was not familiar with it until recently. Just I don't know if the arcades I went to just never had it or what. I don't know how I missed it back in the day. Maybe I thought it was I might have thought it was like Karate Champ, and Karate Champ I was never huge on.
No, this is a way better game than Karate Champ.
Yeah, miles better than Karate Champ. You could kind of argue Karate Champ was the proto Street Fighter game, but this is much better. Yeah, I mean this fixes every problem with Karate Champ.
Yeah, and I did. There was an arcade, a bar with an arcade in it that my parents and their friends would go to and bring the kids to every once in a while, and they had this game. I really didn't see this in many other arcades. I don't know if it was unpopular or what. For 1985, really impressive.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no doubt. I think it's a very very good game for its time.
There was a sequel. I never played it, so nothing to say about it. Yeah, let's dive into yours.
So I went with Daytona USA, which I pretty much only have ever played on Sega Saturn. And it's a game I like, but every time I play it, I'm like, oh, this game really doesn't hold up super well today. I probably should go back and do the arcade version sometime. So it's a basic racing game. It was a launch title in the US for Sega Saturn, and it's still if you can get yourself into 1995 mindset, it still looks pretty good. Obviously looks, compared to racing games on Super Nintendo or Genesis or even, Jaguar or 3DO, there's just no comparison in terms of quality. It's a really amazing looking game, but it suffers a lot of technical problems we had at that era, mostly the background drawing. So there's a lot of like that pop-in effect, like you're driving and then just suddenly trees, right?
Yeah.
Like there's nothing and now there's trees. And early PlayStation games were a little better about that. So like Ridge Racer was a little bit better in that department. So I think that's where Daytona suffered a little bit. But I think it's still, it's still pretty fun. It still has a very memorable soundtrack. I know some people will occasionally make fun of the soundtrack or the rolling start vocals or whatever. I actually really like that. The soundtrack is one I listen to, not every day, but fairly often. I have it on a few different playlists. It's it's very up tempo, but not like distracting. So it's kind of a decent soundtrack, to have on when you're doing work or whatever. And I have not looked at how much this goes for. What does this go for?
It was a very popular game, so I'm pretty sure it won't be too much.
Yeah, I'm going to have it. I opened eBay here for the purpose of looking for it. It's like a $10 game on eBay. The version I have is the one that's on the pack-in version, where it's like Virtua Fighter 2, Virtual Cop, and Daytona USA all in one box.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I have that one, I think.
Yeah, I don't think I have ever owned it as a standalone game. And then there's another one called Championship Circuit Edition that I unfortunately haven't played. This looks like one where you can actually get the Japanese version a little bit cheaper, but the Saturn is not region free, so I wouldn't recommend doing that.
Yeah.
Unless you also happen to own a Japanese Saturn.
Now, I went to play the MAME ROM of this, and I couldn't find it. And I have so many ROMs, just for some reason, couldn't find it. So, and I own this on Saturn, so I emulate it in RetroArch, of course. Because that's how lazy I am. So, surprisingly, it played and emulated really well.
Okay.
And Saturn's known for being really difficult to emulate, so I was really surprised, and I just kept wishing it was. I liked it, but I've played Virtual Racer before.
Yeah.
So, and it really doesn't come close to that.
Right. Yeah, that's the thing. Like Virtual Racing is, I think, technically an older game, but seems to hold up better.
Yeah.
Which is strange.
Wow. I guess. Yeah, I didn't think about that.
I guess it's kind of lower fi, so the graphic intensity isn't as great, so you don't get as much of like the weird pop-on effect and stuff.
It's not as smooth. Like Daytona USA is not as smooth as Virtual Racing.
Yeah, I'll give you that. Yeah. And then I think like, I was gonna say, and then I think with like Nintendo 64, you start to get like really, really good home racing games again. There was sort of the stretch where like when 16-bit peaked with stuff like, Outrun or whatever. That was kind of the peak of racing games. Then I think they actually got worse for a while. With stuff like Hard Driving, which neat for its time, but not particularly good. Like Daytona. And then, so the technology made a big leap, but the gameplay kind of suffered a little bit. And now past Daytona into the N64 era, the technology now was like the games played as good as the technology allowed. If that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, I think we could say that about the most genres switching into 3D. It was
the first wave of games. Yeah,
that's why no one owns a PS1 Classic.
Yeah, I mean, I have it, but just only going back to like our first episode. Like, I just have it at this point because I have like 40 RPGs loaded onto it.
And they are giving them away.
Yeah, I bought it half price, and I'm sure I could get it even cheaper now.
Yeah.
Is it still around?
I don't know.
I was assuming like I would see like crazy Black Friday deals where it's like $9 or something. Looks like $19.99 right now on eBay. Target is selling something. Nope, that's not it. Target has something, again, not sponsored by Target, even though we mentioned it a lot. Has the PlayStation loot box, which has a bunch of PlayStation, well, to be lack of a better term, junk, but not the PlayStation Classic.
Oh, speaking of deals, I forgot to mention this earlier. I happened to get in, and I don't know. This is how impulsive I am. Steam was blowing out Steam controllers for $5 plus shipping. So I got a second Steam controller for some reason.
Mm-hmm. I saw that and decided not to buy one because I pretty much just use like classic controller USB adapters on the PC.
I will probably never unbox this.
Probably not.
Anything else to say about Daytona USA?
Nope. No.
Want to move on to listener feedback?
Yeah, listener feedback. Again, email at retrogameclub.net. Do you want to tease our next games that we're going to be playing over the winter break?
Sure, yeah. I'm going to play some Wipeout. Probably a few different systems because for a while there it was like the tech demo when a new system came out. So Wipeout. Start with the original and move on from there.
Now, I have it on PlayStation. I have the long box version, so I will probably play that.
Ooh, nice.
And then I think I will play Legend of Zelda Link to the Past for my game because I actually started that on the Switch this week and would like to finish it over the next couple of weeks. I can't speedrun it. You mentioned you get through it really quickly. I don't remember where everything is well enough. So it'll take me a little while to get through.
Unless you play it on easy mode.
This does not have an easy mode. The Super Nintendo games don't do that. It's only great. NES games so far.
That is great.
Yeah. In all fairness, though, it's a lot easier than Zelda 2.
Yeah.
It doesn't, except for one or two boss fights, it really doesn't need an easy mode. Let's start to see. I'll do the first email from Majors talking about Black Friday deals. So he's never done it before other than, and this is going to sound very dated, once went to get cheap 8 gig USB drives from Office Max in the 90s. So now 8 gig drives, I can buy like a carton of them for $10 on Amazon.
Yeah.
Blastmaster Zero said you can pick it up for like $10 and it's he thought it was worth it, although it's not quite as big as the Castlevania games on the DS. He said he personally has never taken a day off to play a new release, but he does have friends who have planned time off ahead of time for game launches.
I've done it.
Oh, wow. What happens if it gets delayed?
Oh, yeah. Then you just show up to work.
Okay. And they're like, wait, I thought you were sick. Okay.
Yeah, you just blame them.
No, I'm better now. He has high praise for Sega Rally, and definitely thinks it deserves to be on the top 10 list for the Sega Saturn, and he says we should make sure we give it another try. And he encourages you to buy a Saturn, but probably not knowing that you had one. You just don't have hooked up.
Exactly.
Yeah. We talked about the 2400 baud modem for $175. Yeah, he says back in the early 90s, he bought a 9600 baud modem for $175.
I used to have one too, yeah.
He bought it. This sounds very shady. He bought it from a police officer that also ran a BBS. There is way more to that story that I need to hear.
Yes.
And he says he would join, if we had a Discord channel, he would definitely join it. So that's good. You haven't done that yet. And yes, toboggan is a southern term for a knit hat. If you remember that.
Yeah, we had both never heard that before.
Now, again, I think if you live in an area that snows, you only have toboggan as in a wooden sled that you can definitely wreck on. Those are the worst sleds, by the way. I don't know about you, but you take your kids sledding, I assume, even though there's no elevation in either of our home states.
Oh, yeah. There's big enough hills.
Yeah. So, as for some Game Club games, Vectron, he also could not figure it out, but encourages people to try the Intellivisionaries podcast, episode 31, where they talk about it, and that is a good podcast. Maybe they can explain what you're supposed to be doing in that game. Also thinks Keystone Capers is a top 10 Atari 2600 game. Yie Ar Kung-Fu, he played it for the first time in a roller rink. Oh, I miss roller. I mean, I couldn't roller skate, but I missed the arcade part of roller rinks. The arcade, and the terrible, terrible pizza.
And music.
And music. Yeah, the music was actually kind of awesome. But if you could do everything about the roller rink experience except having to wear roller skates, I'd be down for that. And then later on, played it on a bootleg NES card. Thought it was pretty basic, but it does have some of that Konami charm to it. Like when the player performs his victory dance after winning. And then Daytona, again, just sort of prefers Sega Rally and also loves the main theme song. And this has a picture of some Solomon's Key Christmas ornaments he had commissioned recently.
Those are cool. Yeah.
Yeah, very nice. Want to get the next one?
I'll get this one.
Yeah.
Eric from the Pacific Northwest writes in. He was listening to episode 30 about our Game Boy interface segment, and he wondered if we ever tried Swiss. Most people use it as an alternative to GB Player Disc for GameCube. It lets you run homebrew and tinker with other Game Boy type stuff. And then he was also thinking about hard modded GameCubes, like with a chip, because of the cost of those mini DVD-Rs. And he recently had a chance to purchase one, but passed up on it, and he may circle back around and actually pick that up. And yeah, I actually never looked into a chip-modded GameCube. I think it's because Wii can play GameCube, so I always just figure, like, just mod a Wii, you can kind of do it all,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Wii... The one annoying thing about the Wii is you can't... There are some GameCube games that won't play for a really dumb reason. Like, I wanted to play Phantasy Star Online 3 or something on the Wii, right? One of the Phantasy Star Online games. And that game will not boot on the Wii because there's some hardware issue where it like tries to check for the presence of a modem. Because you're supposed to have a modem, to play...
Yeah.
To play it, and there's some hardware check that fails and crashes the game.
Oh, jeez.
So it's like it's one of the few known incompatible games. But overall, yeah, the Wii is a pretty good way to play GameCube games. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And then he asks us a question: what's our favorite emulation device? If you can't use a PC, RetroPie. If you can't use a PC or RetroPie, what would it be? Like Android tablet, a Wii?
Because you can't use an Android tablet. I think it's basically asking for what device would you use. So like I would almost always say Ouya, but I would count that as an Android tablet. So like in terms of game systems that you use for emulation, is how I'm reading this.
I think the 3DS with the R4 dual core card, which is literally $11, is by far the best way for like Atari through, I think you could do Neo Geo. Atari through 32X pretty much. Mm-hmm. That's my favorite. The Vita is pretty great. How about you? Do you have a preference?
I don't know, because I don't do a lot of console modding. I mean, I've done some emulation on Dreamcast. It's okay. It's, kind of spotty at times. I at one point had a modded Xbox One with MAME on it, but then eventually it had a hardware failure. So actually had that at like the office, because this is an office. Long story short, it's a company where we had like a lot of like late night deployments. So I'm like, I'm setting up a Xbox MAME machine here. Because there's a lot of like sitting around waiting for code to install involved in this job.
But also you have a huge cart and optical disc collection where I'll often ask you if you have a certain ROM and you say no, I own it.
Yeah,
so, no.
Yeah, 'cause I have tons of like arcade collections for PlayStation 2. Like I probably have every arcade collection made for PlayStation 2 over here.
Yeah.
So like I just don't think of consoles to do emulation very much. I think I would like to get like a modded Vita or PSP one day, but I also like to play original games on there, and sometimes when you mod systems, now you can't play the original games anymore. So
that's the good thing about the 3DS. You just buy this card,
and
you're good to go.
Yeah, maybe I should do that, because I have because I'm a crazy person, I own multiple DSs. So I could probably sacrifice like an early DS for some crazy project. Like I have a DS Lite. It's probably never going to get used again. Maybe I should just see if I can run NES games on it.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, it's a cart. You don't have to mod anything. It's great.
Yeah, I think if somehow it fries something,
Oh yeah, cause right. Kind of like how that latest Street Fighter 2 reissue cart said like might melt your SNES.
Right. Yeah, exactly like that. So I just I never do that. And then Joe, so he's catching up on some back episodes here. Wants to talk about Super Mario World. Played Super Mario World before playing Super Mario 3, and was eventually surprised to see how much better Super Mario 3 was. More power-ups, more variety in stages, more mini-games. So he agrees it's a much better game overall. But he thinks, again, Super Mario World was a great game. It also had the debut of Yoshi. And that one of the downsides of the game is the cape makes the game maybe a little too easy. But all in all, it's a really great pack-in for the Super Nintendo, and you don't really see games of that quality packed in with consoles anymore. At least not at launch. Later on, I guess later revisions, you get great games, but yeah, at launch, you're lucky to get a sampler disc now.
Yeah.
He's a big fan of Arch Rivals and like the cartoon graphics on the arcade monitors, and also notes that it's basically just a template for NBA Jam, which everybody loves. Everybody likes NBA Jam, right?
Everyone.
Yep. I'm sorry you cannot like NBA. Even if you don't know the name of a single basketball player, you have to like NBA Jam, I think. And then he was very impressed with Daytona USA back in the day. Only a few years removed from polygonal hard driving, SEGA made a huge investment in defense contractor-grade computer hardware to make it. I did not know that. 8-player linked Daytona cabinets are an icon of the early 90s arcades. Yeah, I completely forgot about that when I was going back and playing it. That was certainly a big deal. Yeah, for years he didn't know there was more than one track because you were always playing the same track in these 8-player ones. And if the Sega Saturn was cheaper and had a port of this in Virtual Fighter as good as the version of Play, he said if the Sega Saturn was cheaper and the port of Daytona was as good a quality as the Ridge Racer port on PlayStation, maybe the 32-bit war would have turned out different.
Maybe. It probably would have taken a little bit more than that.
Yeah, the cheaper part would have helped for sure.
Yes.
Coming out more, but yeah, I keep saying like PlayStation had such an incredibly strong launch library. I think that was the big difference maker is when the PlayStation came out, it like on day one, it had like a better library than the Saturn had with its 6-month head start, or for in the US about 4.5-month head start.
Yeah. Well, cool. Thank you, Joe, for that email. Email at retrogameclub.net. Please write in so you could get in on episode 1, season 2.
Yes.
We have some cool interviews lined up. We have some cool topics lined up. We're really going to hit it hard and just use this time to kind of catch up.
Yeah. So if we're going to call it season 2, are we going to do like expansion passes too?
We should do loot boxes.
Loot boxes, okay. Virtual audio loot boxes.
Yeah, somehow.
That'd be a good way for me to get rid of some unwanted junk, right? Call it a loot box.
Yeah, just leave it outside someplace. Now, we haven't decided if we're going to call it like season 2, episode 1, episode 32. Like, is it going to be officially season 2? We don't know yet. No one knows.
No idea. And we'll figure it out sometime between now and early January. We will figure this out.
So, all right. Everyone have a great rest of their year.
Yeah, enjoy whatever holidays you're celebrating and New Year's. Hope they're all great, and see you in 2020.